Well, I don't know. I might have to speak to Russia, to be honest with you, about Tomahawks. Do they want to have Tomahawks going in their direction? I don't think so. I think I might speak to Russia about that, in all fairness. I told that to President Zelensky, because Tomahawks are a new step of aggression.
U.S. President Donald Trump threatens Putin to send Tomahawk missiles through Ukraine. The Pentagon has been helping Ukraine to strike Russia's energy system. Meanwhile, Trump has arrived in the Middle East to declare the end of the war in Gaza. Why does Trump use Tomahawk missiles as a bargaining chip, and how does U.S. aid Ukraine's strikes on Russia? U.S. President Donald Trump has indicated that he's prepared to authorize the transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine should Russia continue to resist efforts toward a negotiating end to its war against Ukraine. The comments delivered in recent statements to reporters on Air Force One mark a potential escalation in U.S. military support for Ukraine, a notable shift in tone from President Trump. While Trump has touted his ability to end the war within 24 hours, this week he introduced a new dimension to his rhetoric: military pressure. The Tomahawk missile, a long-range precision weapon typically launched from ships or submarines, would represent a major increase in Ukraine's strike capability. With a range of 1,550 miles, the missile could enable Ukraine to reach targets deep inside Russian territory, including potentially strategic military assets near Moscow. Also, President Trump urged Vladimir Putin to halt his war against Ukraine or face tough consequences.
I think what you can take is that never give up. Just never give up. You know, last week they killed over 7,000 soldiers, mostly soldiers, and a little bit more, frankly, Russian soldiers than Ukraine soldiers last week. But think of it, every week they're losing from 5,000 to 7,000 soldiers. It's ridiculous. And I thought that would be one of my easier ones. I mean, when you settle something that's been going on for 31 and 32 years, that's, in theory, a lot harder than setting, something that's been going on for 3 years. But this is a war going on for 3 years, should have never started. Frankly, I give Ukraine credit for doing so well. I mean, they're good fighters. They're very good fighters. I really think that President Putin would look great if he got this settled. And I think he's going to settle it, but we're going to see. And if he doesn't, it's not going to be good for him.
However, Trump has been careful to qualify his statements. In an earlier conversation on October 7th, he said he was pretty close to making a decision on Tomahawks, but was still seeking detailed information from Ukrainian leadership. Sources close to Trump team says that any decision would likely involve coordination throughout NATO or in Eastern European allies, rather than a direct US to Ukraine transfer. The discussion around Tomahawks appears to have gained momentum following a meeting between Trump and President Zelensky in New York in late September on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. According to Ukrainian media reports, Zelensky personally submitted a request for Tomahawk missiles during the meeting and followed up with formal documentation outlining Ukraine's needs, complete with operational illustrations and targeting scenarios. Zelensky, who has grown increasingly vocal about the need for long-range precision systems, said publicly that the mere suggestion of Tomahawk was enough to make Russia afraid. In an interview following his phone call with Trump, Zelensky said that if missiles were provided, Ukraine would only use them against military targets, aiming to avoid civilian casualties and broader escalation. Moscow has responded with alarm to Trump's statement. The Kremlin is in panic right now. Putin's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the prospect of Tomahawk being deployed to Ukraine was met with extreme concern and would mark a new stage of escalation. Russian dictator Putin issued his own warning earlier in October, saying that supply of Tomahawk to Ukraine would destroy what remains of US-Russia relations and could trigger a response that goes beyond the battlefield. Quote, "Such weapons fundamentally change the nature of the conflict. It introduces capabilities that require a different kind of response." The Tomahawk missile is considered one of the most US reliable and versatile strike platforms. It has been used in multiple US military operations, including Iraq, Libya, Syria, while Ukraine already possesses other long-range systems such as Storm Shadow and ATACMS, Tomahawk would represent a leap in both range and payload. US defense officials noticed that transferring such systems would require both logistical planning and political coordination, especially if the US weapons are drawn from US Navy stockpiles or involve launch platforms. Still, Trump's language indicates that the potential for transfer remains on the table, but only under strict conditions. Analysts say the next step may involve diplomatic outreach, possibly even direct communication between Trump and Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, the US has been quietly providing critical intelligence to support Ukraine in conducting long-range drone and missile strikes targeting Russia's oil refineries and energy infrastructure, according to Financial Times. Citing US and Ukrainian officials, reports state that Trump's administration authorized deep cooperation, allowing Ukraine to disrupt Russia's fuel processing capabilities. The covered assistance includes intelligence on flight routes, attack timing, altitude profiles, and targeting parameters, all designed to help Ukrainian drones evade Russia's air defense and maximize damage to Russia's facilities. The report describes US involvement as extending beyond passive intelligence sharing. American personnel are said to be closely involved in all stages of planning. This includes not only providing intel, but also actively working with Ukrainians to coordinate the operational execution of drone strikes inside Russian territory, often far beyond the front lines. Ukraine, the report notes, retains formal authority over target selection, but once a target is chosen, the US assists in identifying and in refining the technical details necessary to conduct effective strikes. Some officials told Financial Times that American intelligence has at times suggested specific targets within Russia's energy sector, underscoring the extent of US influence over campaign. That includes supporting operations that impact Russia's ability to sustain this war. According to report, this covert collaboration has been underway for months and has intensified significantly since mid-2025. In that time, Ukraine has successfully carried out strikes against more than a dozen of Russia's most critical oil refineries. At least 16 out of the country's 38 known refining facilities have reportedly been targeted. The campaign has resulted in a substantial degradation of Russia's refining capacity, disrupting as much as 1 million barrels per day of output, according to Ukrainian defense sources. Some strikes reach as far as 1,400 kilometers inside Russia, including an attack on the Bashneft UNPZ facility in Ufa, a significant blow to Russia's war effort. These strikes, officials say, are designed to hit the economic backbone of Russia's war. Strikes, and Moscow depends heavily on oil exports and fuel production, remain central to sustaining military revenue. By targeting this infrastructure, Ukraine, with US assistance, aims to degrade both Russia's battlefield capabilities and its broader war economy. Financial Times also reports that this phase of intensified intelligence sharing and targeting support began shortly after a phone call in July 2025 between President Trump and President Zelensky. During that conversation, Trump asked whether Ukraine would be capable of reaching Moscow itself if provided with long-range weapons. That exchange, while not publicly confirmed, appears to have marked a turning point. US intel assistance reportedly increased in both depth and scope following the call, intending to help Ukraine strike more strategic targets deep within Russian territory. Quote, "The idea is to bring pain to Putin, where it hurts economically. The strikes are also meant to apply political pressure on Moscow to come to the negotiating table. Some US strategists view the refinery campaign as a means to compel a recalculation by Kremlin, particularly as the war's grings on and battlefield lines harden." Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump just landed in Israel in a high-profile diplomatic visit aimed at reinforcing the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, a deal he has framed as a landmark breakthrough that could reset the trajectory of the Middle East conflict. The trip, which also includes a scheduled stop in Egypt for peace talks, marks Trump's most visible foreign policy intervention. he is seeking to leverage a recently brokered deal as evidence of what he calls a new beginning for the region. Trump's itinerary began with a meeting in Tel Aviv, where he was welcomed by Israeli officials and delivered a formal address to the Knesset. The president cast the visit as a pivotal moment, saying the ceasefire deal, supported by U.S. intelligence and diplomatic leverage, had created a rare window for peace. Following his stop in Israel, Trump is scheduled to travel to Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, where he will attend a high-stakes regional peace summit hosted by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. The summit aims to chart a course for Gaza's post-war governance and rebuild regional trust after more than 2 years of war. The visit comes just days after a US-backed agreement led to a breakthrough in long-standing conflict between Israel and Hamas. The deal includes several core provisions: a phased Israeli withdrawal from key areas of Gaza, the release of hostages, with 7 of surviving 20 already returned, the freeing of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, the opening of border crossing for humanitarian aid into Gaza, international monitoring of a ceasefire by US observers. The White House has described the deal as impactful but critical, while Trump has used stronger language, calling the war over and declaring the hostage release as a triumph for diplomacy. Speaking in Tel Aviv, Trump made clear that he views the ceasefire not only as a step toward peace, but as a personal success. The peace summit in Sharm el-Sheikh is expected to draw over 20 heads of states and global leaders, including European Union representatives, Arab League nations, UN Secretary General. But Israel and Hamas are both notably absent from the summit, along with Iran. That's all for today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and glory to Ukraine.